Okay, so we're here at the beautiful Pinewood Golf Club with James Leitz, and we had some good educational days here. And we have some questions for you here, James. So first, can you name 3 preferences you think are fundamental for world-class ball striking?
Well, for starters, I think we have to pay definite reference to the laws before preferences. So to me, there's only 4 laws: the speed, path, face, and impact point. Speed obviously determines how far you can hit the ball. The path of the club actually is in between, split between angle of attack and right and left of the hole. So path has its horizontal component and its vertical component, but there's only one true path of the golf club at impact. The third is the club face, which is the face angle in relation to the hole, and it also in relation to the path is what determines curvature. So what creates the D plane is the path of the club and the face of the club. And when the path and the face don't match, there's curvature with a center face hit. If the path and the face match, the D plane that's formed is vertical, and therefore the ball will fly straight. And the last thing is impact point, which has unbelievable amount of influence on ball flight. I think it's the most overlooked of all the laws. And if it's heel or toe or high or low, it affects ball flight drastically. So I think every golfer, and for sure every instructor, needs to know and understand those 4 laws and how to adjust them for their student, and for the student at least to have enough of a toolbox to be able to adjust them themselves when they're out on the golf course and they seem to be struggling and can't figure it out. So they have to have enough knowledge of those 4 to determine what they need to work on. Now, as far as preferences are concerned, obviously preferences, we have to hit when the ball's on the ground, we have to hit the ball and then the ground. That's pretty much, we don't have to dig deeply into the ground, but in my opinion, hitting down on the ball, we have a better chance of hitting the ball higher in the face than if we try to sweep it off the ground with an iron. We can, but usually the ball hits too low in the face and it's not as solid a golf shot as if we hit down. So therefore, if we're going to hit down on the ball, I think that it's not totally required, but a heavy preference of mine that the shaft be leaning somewhat at impact with every shot hit off the ground. Now, once when the ball's up on a tee, you don't have to hit down on the ball because the ground's not part of the equation. But to do that, you have to have where the shaft lags behind the left arm just a little bit. Not a lot. Obviously, we know that could be detrimental. But just a little. I haven't seen many great players that ever played that didn't lean the shaft forward at impact. And I've seen very few players whose shaft passes their left arm up at impact with an iron. A few, some world-class players. So to me, the more heavy preference is a leaning shaft, and my other preference is the shaft behind the left arm. So that's one of the preferences I have. The other preference I have is that to be able to achieve that and to get the club on a good path, the pivot has its sense of responsibilities. So some of my preferences there is to teach players at athletic stance to where they can move their pivot fast enough to support the alignments that we need of impact, and also to create speed, because remember, acceleration and deceleration of the pivot is what creates speed, and then what creates the impact alignments is how our body moves the arms and the club to deliver it into the golf ball. So it has its speed component, and it also has its impact alignment component. So those are very, very important preferences, how we move. For instance, if a person swings more left than they need to be, maybe they need more hip slide. If they swing too far to the right, maybe they need less hip slide on the downswing. So those are preferences. As far as grip is concerned, I love a grip maybe a little bit tiny on the strong side, and if a person has too much lag, then we might back off on it. So that's another preference. I don't really teach a real super neutral grip unless a person really has a lot of built-in lag and can control the club face, and then I'll get it into a weaker position.
So follow-up question. Do you have a model swing, like with positions?
A true model, in other words, get everybody to look exactly the same, I would say no. Obviously, the more time you have with someone and the longer term you have with someone, the more you can mold them into something you really, really maybe is a preference. But as far as day in and day out, it's very difficult to change everything about someone's golf swing. So I pick and choose my battles of what I want to change. So my players might look a little bit different because in the end, it's a fight between the club head and the golf ball. Obviously, Jim Furyk, Matt Kuchar, and Tiger Woods all have different backswings, and they're all wildly successful. And no one would say that any three of those fell into any one single model.
Thank you. What values on path would you like to see on someone who's aspiring? You have a young player aspiring to be a tour player one day?
Yes, I do. You know, having taught with TrackMan for 7 years and 3D for 8 years, full body 3D, my slight preferences, what's amazing is if a player is really good at playing any impact alignment, a certain path, and a face that complements that path to get the ball working back to the target and can do it regularly, it's good. However, the more the path is away from the hole, the more curvature we introduce to get the ball to come back to the hole, and the bigger the potential of pulls and pushes. That doesn't mean I try to zero anybody out, but usually on the inside outside on a right hand golfer, usually in the out 3 would maybe be my maximum number that I'd like to see with an iron, 2 to 3 at the most. With the iron, I mean the wood, I might allow a little bit more, and then on the left side, I don't mind. I like less than 2. 2 is about my number. The problem is when it gets a little bit more than 2, if you lose the face at all, it's a bigger pull. So just remember, your path, whatever it may be, is what amounts to your pushes and pulls. So if your path is 4 degrees or 5 degrees to the right, then your push is 5 degrees to the right. Now, at 300 yards, 5 degrees to the right is 80 feet. So that's a pretty big push, whereas if you only got a 2-degree path, it's much smaller. So I think that's important when you're choosing your paths, not to get what I call adverse paths, is when they get too big away from 0, then there are much more problems with pushes and hooks and pulls.
Thank you. Any other messages you would like to send to the instructors in Sweden?
Well, follow your passion, keep learning. I learn and evolve every single day. I'm still learning, and I love learning. I love coming to work and learn and to get better, and always be willing to understand new concepts. And before we maybe push them away, we need to definitely understand them first. And I think that that's very important, is to keep evolving, keep following the science. But remember, golf's played by feel, but there's a scientific alignment system behind it that determines someone's success or failure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.